You're listening to the British Baseball Podcast. Hello, baseball fans. Matthew here again with another episode of the British Baseball Podcast, and we are revisiting the series from last season with baseball clubs in review. And I'm joined today by the former head coach of the Brighton Buccaneers, Craig Savage. Hi, Craig. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, very well, cheers, thank you. But before we get into the episode, I'd like to invite each and every one of you to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you can get your podcasts from. And if it's possible, just write a little review. Not only will it make you a better baseball player, it'll also give you the warm and fuzzies. None of that there has been scientifically proven to be accurate, but I'm saying it anyway because why not? And Craig has decided to join us today to talk us through some of the history of the Brighton Buccaneers baseball team. Craig, do you want to start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your involvement in baseball before we hit the club?
Yeah, my involvement with baseball is fairly lengthy and it goes back a long way, probably to my teenage years, because a large contingency of my family are natives of San Diego in California. And so I've always had this interest, this fascination with the sport, and so growing up as a teenager in the UK, I used to listen to games on the radio late at night, and just it was the only way that I could really start to get into and absorb the sport that really fascinated me. And so when I came back from a trip to see my family one time, I just thought to myself, you know what, I just need to maybe pursue this a little more and find out what was going on here and what the opportunities and the possibilities were. And so I approached the local team, which at the time were called the South Coast Buccaneers. And baseball has been played in Brighton forever and a day. You know, right back as far as there was a baseball game in the centre of Brighton in 1917 between the USA and Canada, and I think the crowd was something like 5,000 people. And so I started to just kind of get a little bit involved in the local history of the sport, and found out that had happened. And there was a club from the 60s called the Brighton Jets. And so that's how I sort of followed my path of interest, really. And I just started playing for the local team. And as time went by, my interest became greater and greater. My involvement became greater. I absorbed lots of knowledge, and we started to take it forward in a little bit more of a professional capacity, if you like. Not professional in the fact that we were getting paid, but in the way that we did things. And so that's how my involvement really kind of transpired.
Oh, that's interesting. Cool. So what else do you know about baseball within the area of Brighton, and how far back does your history knowledge go?
Well, as I say, you know, I've looked back to see what has gone on many years ago, and when I came along, I think the team were playing in the third division of the Southern League, as I recall. And I remember thinking to myself, that's not good. That's not good enough. I had sort of aspirations of you know, ideas of grandeur, and I wanted to take things forward. And so it was about trying to find out who wanted to do what other people's aspirations were, and did they match mine. And you know, there was a lot of guys involved that were a lot older than me, and it was interesting listening to their history and how they'd got into the sport and how a couple of them have been playing, way back when. And it just fascinated me, and it made me feel that as though I wanted to take things forward, not just for me, but for those around me that had the same kind of ideas and aspirations as I did. And it just, you know what, it set us on a pretty interesting journey, I have to say.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. That I've been doing a segment on the show. Well, I say I've been doing one. The first one was in January about British baseball history, and I was never really a history person at school, and I'm quite embarrassed by my lack of knowledge when it comes down to history as a whole. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know like key events and certain things, but it's not as deep as like. But researching British baseball history and the teams and the players and the areas and how the game's grown and developed, I can't get enough of it. Like today, I've literally spent best part of 3, maybe 4 hours behind my laptop, just reading and making notes and just looking into things and just going further down this rabbit hole. It's really, really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting to know. And it is nice to look back on. I mean, if you can go back and look as far as, I don't know what, the turn of the last century, to clubs like Aston Villa, like Tottenham Hotspur, like Derby, and there is history and there is visual history out there that you can absorb, and I think it's remarkable to see the connection that this country's had to the sport, and it's immensely disappointing, I have to say, and it was partly why there was a number of reasons why I down tools and left the sport, but I just didn't see it matching my desires, my expectations, what I wanted for the sport. But when I look back with huge passion and admiration for what's gone before. And when I say what's gone before, I don't just mean the 80s or the 70s or the 90s. I'm talking about around the war. And I know a couple of guys have documented lots of stuff. Josh Chetwin's done a lot of work on the history, as has an opponent of ours, Gary Bedingfield at Enfield Spartans, has done huge amounts of work.
Yeah.
And it's created a really interesting story that I think people who are into the sport now, maybe just coming into the sport, have been around for maybe the last 5 or 10 years, and even the likes of Gotti, who's still out there doing it. Not necessarily him in terms of what I'm trying to say now, but it would be interesting to see those young lads looking back and seeing what's gone before, and maybe it will inspire people to work even harder, to achieve good things, because it's a great sport.
Yeah,
it really is a great sport, and I can't tell you how much enjoyment, satisfaction it's provided me over the years. I mean, I've met some incredible people from all over the world. I've done some baseball has afforded me to do things that may not have been possible. So I'm hugely grateful to the sport and all the people that I've come across over the years that I've played with, I've played against, those that have played for me. It's just been an incredible journey, and one that I'm actually really enjoying now, looking back on, I have to say, with a massive sense of pride of not just what Brighton achieved, but what collectively a group of teams achieved, in terms of the late 90s to the early years of 2000.
Yeah.
I have huge admiration for what we did, and I truly believe that with the right drive we could have gone a lot further, but that wasn't to be. So it's a shame, really, but there we are.
Yeah. So let's talk then about the Brighton Buccaneers. How far back can you take us with your knowledge and history of the Bucks?
Well, like I said, the Bucks were born out of a team in the '60s, the Brighton Jets. Then there was a team just outside Brighton called the South Coast Buccaneers. Then there was the Worthing Warriors, and the Brighton Jets and the Worthing Warriors came together to create the South Coast Buccaneers. Which when myself and a couple of my colleagues got involved, we looked at the situation and thought, you know what, that the name doesn't give the club the right identity that we need. And we were playing in a suburb of Brighton at the time, and it was our immediate goal to get back to Brighton. And we were playing about 7 or 8 miles outside of the city, in a place called Shoreham, and then we moved slightly closer by a couple of miles to another area called Southwick. And then we were able to negotiate our way back into the city, and that was a really pivotal time, because we were able to access national lottery funding, and we built a fantastic facility. It used to get many plaudits. We hosted the national championships many times.
Yeah.
And it used to get lots of plaudits, not only from the British baseball community, but when the sport was at its, some talk about it being at its peak, 1991 to 2004 maybe. There was a lot of quality overseas players collectively playing, and the amount of times people used to say, "Oh my God, this field's better than my college field," and so we really started to create a bit of a snowball effect, and as the club grew, more and more people who were playing at different clubs around the country wanted to come and play with us, and we were able to then create a club tier system, which we had 3 teams playing in the Brighton area, plus junior squads. We also had another team playing in a lower league that we were running a few miles up the road. We then had another team playing in the county of Kent, and this all came under the auspices of Brighton Baseball Club, and it was a model that we saw could be the way forward for other people. And I think that looking back on it, we had some ideas that we were asked to put on the back burner at one point, which we agreed to do. And you know what? I honestly, sitting here today thinking about it, I wish we hadn't. I wish we'd have pushed forward with our ideas, and who knows? I might have still been involved, as might have been many of the guys who were involved in creating what we created. But that wasn't to be. So, we just, things change. Things come to a point, they come to a crossroads, they change direction, people go different ways. And that's where we found ourselves, really, in the around 2005, 2006. I was on a very different personal journey at that point. and my life was affected by a number of things around 2005, which changed the course of my life quite a bit. So at that point was when I decided I couldn't really give it my focus anymore.
Yeah.
Which was a sad time, but still, anyway, while we were in that moment, it was incredible, and I'm hugely proud to have been a part of it. I have to say to you, not just for Brighton and our club, but for all of the clubs that were around, because it was a fantastic level of competition, Matt. It really was. And whether we see that again or not, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I've probably been on the game too long to comment now.
Do you ever see yourself getting back into baseball?
Gosh, awkward pause. Yes, I do in some capacity. Quite possibly. I can't really say too much more than that at the moment.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's like, because you said it's been a little while since you've been involved. I just wonder if you fancy getting back in it.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned before about the blueprint that you had. Do you think that blueprint would still work today? And if it would, what is it?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. I think it would work today. I truly believe that it would work today, and I know some of the guys have mooted going out and breaking away and doing, creating their own leagues, and that was very much something that we were of the mind of doing at that time, and that was one of the things that we were asked not to do. We had been very successful. We'd gone to Europe and been successful, and there was talk of us doing lots of different things. Not even playing in this country, taking our team and going and playing elsewhere. But yes, I do. In answer to your question, I do. Yes, I do believe that it could happen again. But what I also see, and I don't have much basis for this because I've not delved too deeply. But what I do see now is I see some very, on the face of it, and I use those terms quite loosely, but on the face of it, I see areas and pockets around the country doing some really positive things. But without having taken the time to look into that too deeply, whether that is as successful on the ground as it looks from outside the circle, I don't know. But in answer to your question, yes, I do believe it could. I do believe it can happen again.
Lovely. You said then that you think that the high points of British baseball around that era, with the 90s and the early 2000s. What are some of your favourite memories and favourite games from those time periods?
Do you know what, Matt? We, as a club, we made 7 finals in 7 years, including a European final. We were in 5 national championship finals in 5 years. And the time from, I have to say, from 1999 to 2003 were really incredible times for lots of reasons. 2003, 2004 was an incredible time for me personally, but that's because I got involved doing other things in the US, and I was very grateful for that. And I also, maybe I'll come on to it a little bit later, but I also got involved in professional cricket. But for me, 1999, we won the national championship. We then went to we went to Europe for the European Club Championships, and we did incredibly well. We, without a doubt, played above ourselves. There's no doubt about that. I really believe in sport. You know, it's you can go one of two ways. You can play up to an opposition, and you can certainly play down the standard to opposition. And we stepped up a notch, and it proved to me what I saw was that we were very, very capable indeed. And you know, also it's worth trying to understand that predominantly 95% of our National League side was British players. We weren't getting in loads and loads of overseas players. Lots of the other clubs that were in the National League at that time were made up of lots of overseas players. There's nothing wrong with that, because that brings the British guys along and increases the standard as a whole. And then, you know, hopefully you all play up to that standard. But we went to those European finals, and it was an interesting situation, Matt, because that could have been so different. Even though we made the final and we lost in the final, without a doubt, we knocked the favourites out in the semi-finals, which was a French side called Savigny. But in game one of that championship finals, European Championship finals, our starting pitcher in game one, a guy called Nick Carter, took an absolute laser of a line drive back through the box, and just complete instinct, he tried to barehand it, and it busted his hand.
Wow. And
that was early on in game one of this European Championship tournament. So of course that changed everything, and we had to react very quickly, which we did. We had the personnel to be able to do that. We took a big squad to Belgium, and we took an experienced squad to Belgium. So we were able to cope with that very quickly. But it meant that as we got deeper into the tournament, there was no chance of him coming back because his hand was in a cast, and so that changed things. But it's that experience alone was really quite something, because I still sit here today and I look back on that situation and think, had that not happened, in the way that we continued to go through that tournament in '99, I'm absolutely convinced that had that freak situation not happened in game one, I'm convinced we would have won the European final. Absolutely convinced. We were on a complete high all the way through the tournament, and we gave an incredible account of ourselves. And I suppose that leads us on to us coming back. 2000, we made the national finals again in 2000. As I said to you, we went 5 years in a row making the national final. And in 2000, we played the London Warriors. We lost that final. And then from into the Rawlings National League, that was just such an incredible challenge of pulling all these people together and creating a fantastic squad mentality. Now, bearing in mind that we're based in Brighton, you know the geography. We had British players from Birmingham would play for us every week. Leeds. Our third baseman lived in Scotland, and you know, due to sponsorship that we had, and you know, we managed to secure, as part of what we were doing and creating, we secured, decent levels of sponsorship. Coors Beer, Subway, and other such sponsorships with radio stations and all sorts of things, that we were able to put ourselves in a position whereby if players came to us and said, how can we make this happen, we were in a position to do that. So we could pay for flights from Scotland every weekend, and so that made it really exciting for us, because also those guys, as a core of British players, tended to also be a core of the Great Britain national team. So it had a dual effect, because those players were playing with each other week in, week out, which had an advantageous effect for the GB national squad, because everybody was so familiar with everybody, and everyone was, everybody was part of this collective, and it just made for a fantastic situation. But I have to say that whilst sitting here and talking about our own club, you have to give credit to the other clubs that were in the Royal International League, because there were some incredibly talented players, some very, very consistent games played week in, week out, where, to be honest with you, Matt, you couldn't call it. You just couldn't call it. The league was made up of a group of teams that on any given day, anybody could beat anybody. There was no one team that really excelled. And I think, whilst there's lots of talk about Brighton, and that's all lovely to hear, we may have been, and this isn't, I'm not saying this as to try and get some sort of one-upmanship. I'm just stating it as I see it, that we may have been the most consistent. Maybe us and the London Warriors were possibly the two most consistent clubs week in, week out, which obviously would bode well going forwards as each season opened up. But it was a time when all of the teams had a great set of players on their squads, which just made for incredible competition. And that's what made it so exciting. That's what made it so good. And yes, there was huge rivalries, Matt. When you cross the white line, there's huge rivalries. There's no getting away from that. But what I have to say to you is that outside of that, all of the teams just had such a great bunch of guys. Yes, there were guys on teams that would know how to get under the skin of the opposition. But once the game was over, I have to say, in the most part, everybody was absolutely fantastic. It was an absolute pleasure to play against Enfield Spartans, Bracknell Blazers, the London Warriors, Windsor Bears, week in, week out. Just absolutely fantastic. It's just a great experience.
Yeah. Which teams do you think brought out the best in Brighton?
Which teams brought out the best in Brighton? That's difficult to say, Matt. Do you know what? I always feared as a younger player, I was always in awe of the Enfield team. You know, they were really strong in the early 90s, and I just looked up to them and thought, great bunch of guys, as were all of the teams, all played the game in the right way, were very, very competitive, you know, played the game hard. But I always looked up to Enfield as being a team that I would be very nervous of. But I think London always brought out the best in Brighton. I think Windsor had some fantastic players who were, as I said earlier, great at getting under your skin. I mean, you know, one player in particular, a guy called Adam Roberts, Australian guy. He was an incredible athlete. He played the game in the right way. He played the game hard. I loved so much about him, but he was one of those players that could make a difference. And he was always a really tough competitor, but off the field, just a great guy, a really nice chap. So I think probably London and Windsor were the two teams that I feel would have brought the best out in us. And I think, you know, we had some great finals against Windsor, I have to say, and it was always, you know, great competitive games.
Cool. Any standout players from your time with Brighton? Who are some of the notable ones?
Any standout
players?
Oh gosh, for us, just so many, Matt. Well, first of all, I mean, if we go back to just a little bit prior to the Rawlins National League, you may not be aware of this, and I don't know if this is still the case, but we were, and I don't know if we still are, the only club to have somebody go on and play in the major leagues.
Oh wow!
So we had a pitcher, John Foster, who came over to play for us through friends and connections that we had. John then went back to play at Lewis Clark State, won a College World Series, and then was signed in, I think it was the 25th round of the draft for the Atlanta Braves in the 90s. And we're talking about, you know, he was a left-handed relief pitcher on a team that if you know if you know players from back then, he was on a roster with Greg Maddox, John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, Andrew Jones, Chipper Jones. I mean, just an absolute stellar lineup of superstars. You know, and John was on that team. He then went on. He was there for a few seasons, and he then went and played for the Kansas City Royals and the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know if that's still the case, but he was outstanding. He was absolutely outstanding, and you could see right from an early age when he was with us as a young guy starting out that he had what it took to go all the way.
Yeah.
But for British players, you know, the likes of Alex Malahoudis, who had a great college baseball career, Nick Carter, David Donaldson, Martin Dutton, Joey Arnold. There was just so many, Matt, just so many quality players that I had the pleasure of being able to put on a lineup sheet every week and think to myself, as far as baseball is concerned in this country, it doesn't get a lot better than this. Yes, there was players that we'd love to have had play for us from other clubs, of course, but we were very, very happy with the players that we had, the squad that we had, because it was incredibly strong.
Excellent. And I suppose I've run out of questions here. Is there anything that you'd like to touch on? Anything you think that we haven't covered?
For me personally, Matt, I mean, I've, like I said to you, it's the sport has afforded me to do some other things, and I got to go to spend time at San Diego State University with a college coach there, and that came about through through one of the players that we had come play for us, who was a shortstop at San Diego State. So I got to go there with my family being there. He thought it was a great idea if I spent some time there, and so I got to spend some time there just when Hall of Famer Tony Gwynn, one of the greatest hitters of all time, took over as head coach of the program. He did an interim year when I was at San Diego State in 2003. And I didn't think I was going to get to go at the time, because that was a big deal that, one of the biggest stars of Major League Baseball was going to be taking over this college team. But it didn't change anything. And I was asked straight away, no, we still want you to come over. So I went. And that was an amazing experience. And then the San Diego Padres were building their new Major League Stadium in downtown San Diego at the time. And it was then announced that the following year, 2004, before the Padres played their first game there, the Moores family, who own the Padres, were going to give the stadium to Tony to create a tournament to raise funds for the Aztecs baseball program, which is the university team. And Tony invited me back as part of the staff. And so the idea of that was not only to raise funds for the program, but also the other big part of this was to try and eclipse the attendance record for a college baseball game, which was 27,000.
Oh.
So we did that. We sold out before the Padres played their first game. We played in Petco Park in front of 40,000 people. And that for me was just an incredible highlight of my time in the sport. And I found that, Matt, really difficult coming back to the UK, having done that, and then had to kind of come down to earth a bit and just pinch myself and get a grip and back to reality. But also in 2003, I was approached by Sussex County Cricket Club. That was the onset of 2020 cricket in 2003 in this country, and I was asked to join the coaching staff. They wanted to change the mindset of cricketers in readiness for this new discipline. And I just got involved with Peter Moores, who went on to be the England manager. We changed things dramatically. And in the first season in 2003, Sussex won their first county championship for 103 years,
uh-huh.
Which of course was all down to me. I mean, again, just another great highlight. And I actually ended up staying for 4 years, and I coached the pros right down through the academy, and I coached all the area coaches, and so it was a great time. And so baseball afforded me that. I also was able to be a part of the preparation team to prepare the England blind cricket team for a test series in Pakistan, which was an incredibly humbling experience, I have to say.
That's cool. I've had John on from Manchester Baseball Club, who's involved in UK blind baseball, and
Right.
that's incredible to see.
Do you know what, Matt? I remember coming away from my first coaching session with the England blind team, and it was the first. God, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about this. It was the first session that we had when I first met the guys. And if you don't know about things, if you don't know about blindness, and I didn't know much about it, and I'd done a little bit of research and worked out that blindness doesn't just mean you can't see. It's just there is elements of different kinds of sight. And I remember coming away from that first practice session, and I have to say to you, and as I say, I can feel myself now just almost welling up. I was in tears. I was absolutely in tears. I couldn't quite. I mean, talk about bringing yourself down to earth. The most humbling experience I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of, I think. Guys with all different levels of sight, some guys with no sight at all. I remember one guy with, it blows my mind. One guy had a glass eye and no eye. There's no sight there. Just insane. And I just found that just the most incredible experience ever.
Yeah.
All from baseball, all from this game that I'd thought as a teenager I was really keen to know more about, and so it's just afforded me some really privileged situations, really.
Yeah. Looking back over your time within the sport, have you got any regrets or anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I regret. I regret us not proceeding with our ideas of implementing something that I think we could have maybe changed the sport for the better. I regret that massively. I don't hold anybody responsible for that. I understand why we were asked not to do it at the time, and we were asked to give everybody one more year. But still, I look back and think we should have just gone with our gut and run with it. But other than that, just the friendships. Some of my players are scattered all over the world now, and even in the last few days, we've been swapping little stories on social media and photographs about the European Championships, and little pranks that we got up to, that you do when you're away with a group of guys. I remember one of the pranks that one of our players was, we were in a clubhouse, we were in bunks and stuff, and I really should have known better, because I could have caused one of my players an injury, but we took out all the slats in his bed and then redressed it on the top bunk. So when he climbed up and jumped onto his bunk and just went straight through it, and just little things like that. We've just been sort of sharing stories over the last few weeks, and so we've got quite a few players in Australia. Dave Donaldson, who's from Scotland, is living in Australia now, as is Michael Close, who is Australian with a British passport, and Alex Malahoudis is there now. So it's been an amazing time. I've made lots of friends. I've made lots of associates that, whilst I don't see or hear from them now, because they've gone their separate ways in other teams, it would be amazing to meet up with everybody and get everybody in a big room and just talk for hours about all the things that we did.
Yeah.
But all of the people that I got to meet is probably the highlight, and to play against some really talented people and pit my wits against other people in terms of, our team, the team that we put on the field, I think yeah, it's just been an incredible journey. And who knows, it might, there might be some things in the future.
Lovely. It's tradition on the show to give the last word to the guest. So, Craig Savage, the mic is all yours. Anything you want to part us with, or any shout outs you want to give?
For me, any shout outs.
Yeah.
Everybody who we've ever played against and who's ever played for me has just made me incredibly proud of what we achieved collectively and what they achieved as a group of people. And I don't want to single anybody out because there's just too many people. But all the teams that I also mentioned, Matt, Windsor Bears, Croydon Pirates, London Warriors, Enfield Spartans, Cambridge Monarchs, all of those guys that have been worthy opponents, worthy opposition. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart.
What a great way to end the show. Craig Savage, that's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed your time. And I look forward to chatting to you soon. Take care.
It's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
Cool stuff. Ta-ra.